Hello, great minds. Welcome to this episode. Happy to have you back. We hope you enjoy yourself and do well to follow us on our social media platforms. It's Great Minds Africa. So, guys, how were you parented? I'm curious. I want to know.
I was parented in a liberal way where my parents, mostly my dad, allow me to feel free and do what I want to do. But then he also observed and look out while guiding me on this journey. I felt he trusted that the way he has trained me was good enough that like go out. He's confident that I'm not going to do anything bad. He's confident that I'm going to be appropriate in my presentation and talking to others and stuff. So generally, I would say it was more liberal.
Well, not in my household. I mean, it was a very old school style of parenting where, father is at the head or in the helm of affairs, whilst he takes a more back role. And then the mom is the one who is in your faces, delivering instructions and whatnot from above. Well, you are praying that she's the one who don't out things or letting you do a chore. You are just grateful if she messes up. But if she goes to hand you over to the boss and you know that you are gonna, you are dead, if that's a word I can use. That style of parent kind of looked as if, there were the heads and then there were the kids. There was a disconnect between how we gelled as a family. I mean, we all knew that there was love in there. It was love that flowed in a certain way, which we don't see in the modern day parenting, where we want to involve the children in everything, or we talk to them, we're doing what we choose to do. Well, let me just give a practical example here, where one morning, right, we were to hurry up and go to school and instructed my elder sister to do the dishes before he left. I mean, everybody was supposed to have done their chores and she had extra chores in doing the dishes before she left. We were to have left the home at 7 o'clock so that we could get to school by 8. My father was, I think, if I heard correctly, was quite upset that she was now coming to do that particular chore when, we had just a few minutes, about 20 or so minutes to go to school and she hadn't yet even taken a bath. My mom was trying to be more, what do you call it, wants to do this before you leave. And I mean, I have two sisters. So the eldest one was the one doing the chore. My elder sister and I were now ready and all confused at what was going on. We're kind of afraid for my sister that she was not going to finish on time and my dad would have to leave, like we'll have to leave without her. And then we're wondering how we're going to come back because she brings us back home. At the time, we have to take a bus back to the house. So how we're going to manage, all kind of thoughts were running through our head. I have my mom sitting in the living room, waiting for my sister to come and tell her that she's done with the dishes. My dad comes out, he's done dressing up, takes his bag and puts in the car. And then we are just all looking like, what's going to happen next, And it was a very uncomfortable, confusing state to have been in at the time. I'm just imagining how it would have been now. Now I'll be like, father would be like, hey, leave those dishes, like, let's just jump when we come back from
Yeah, I
school.
know, right?
But yeah, mom was trying to, show her authority. My father, I'm sure you'd have said she should leave the dishes and probably do it later or something. And we were just caught in a big mess that morning. I mean, eventually, my parents ended up arguing because I was insisting that he has to go now and he's not leaving her behind, and but that was the kind of, it was more authoritarian. There was a disconnect. Heads here, kids don't know anything. We tell you what to do. We tell you what to wear, we tell you what to eat, and we know what's best for you. But here in this modern thing, we are trying to explain why you should eat what you are eating. It's like we are trying to give the kids a much softer life in understanding what to do, when to do it, and why they should do it. They should do that. That's what I had to say. I don't know if I've made any sense at all, but I'm sure all of you can get a glimpse of how it was on my end.
I think it's same at my end. However, you thinking that probably your mom wanted to show authority. Could it be that she wanted your sister to learn what they call consequences for your actions or inactions? So, for example, if you don't wake up on time, you should know that you are going to get to school late, and this is going to be the consequence. I'm just wondering.
Well,
Because probably
you can say that at the time my sister had entered into adolescence, and that there was a struggle between her finding or thinking that she's a woman now, she's grown up. So that I
oh,
I want to believe that my mother felt like she had to show her that she is still a kid in her house. That I think that's what it
okay,
was,
okay,
rather than the
okay.
consequence and whatnot. Yes.
Perfect. I think I was largely raised the same way as you, but probably there's another layer to mine. I was a very sheltered child. When I mean sheltered, especially in the sense of how life really works out there. So pain, my parents did virtually everything to make sure that I don't feel life's pain, because they always saw me as that little girl. Probably that was their way of showing me love. That's fine. But I think growing up years later, going through that kind of parenting, I realized that it takes some things from you. In as much as it gives you some things, it also takes some things from you. But largely, my parenting was fun. It was average. It was okay. Yeah.
So you have more brothers, although you were the firstborn. Would you say that they raised you, you being the first one, they raised you how someone would raise boy child, although you were sheltered, but still, they raise you, giving you that toughness?
No, no. I was not raised with any toughness at all. I think I was raised with enough provision. So I know how to live life when I'm provided certain basic things. So I don't know how to start from scratch. I think that was the type of parenting I had. So let me explain. There were not much gendered roles in my house, for example, because my immediate younger brother, we swept the house every morning together. We did morning chores together. We basically do things together. However, when it comes to, let's say, for example, I ask for books, storybooks, not books that I need in school and all that. Let's say storybooks, for example. I'll be giving those storybooks and more. So I don't know how probably to go to my friend and go and ask my friend, can I borrow your storybook for this and this minute? And probably they'll give me conditions. So that's, should I call it virtue of starting things from scratch, was not part of my parenting. And probably something that I feel every human being or should be part of our parenting. We should know that life is hard. So you have to learn how to bring out the innermost power in you to face certain things. Yeah, so basically that's it. I hope I'm clear.
Well, yeah, you are. I'm just like wondering if you weren't given that toughness, have you grown to be a woman that you, although you say this, but I still see that toughness in you to handle some things. And I'm just wondering how those
Oh,
things came about. Like,
good. So I think those were indirectly handed over to me by my parents. So both my parents are very tough nuts, like very strong characters. When I mean strong character, extremely strong characters. So what they rather gave us was having a mind of our own. So although I was raised with quite a number of people, we were allowed to have our different personalities. I don't remember my parents comparing us. Your sibling had this in math. Why can't you have this in math? No, it was not done. So I think because it was through that route, that was how come I was able to build that in me. So it was not definitely through direct parenting or intentional parenting. It was indirectly passed on to me.
that's great to
I
know because
totally get you.
because in between it, I had parents. Once a while, there's some comparison. Although they were liberal, especially my dad, he was liberal. My mom want to be seen straight.
Strict.
Depending on you as a child, you determine whether she's strict. Am I scared of her? I wasn't though, although I felt she was trying to seem tough, but I didn't see the aspect that I should be scared of her. I do whatever I want to do because I felt like my dad had confidence in me and I do whatever I want to do.
Interesting. So I wanted to add another layer to my parents.
Okay, go ahead.
So what happened was that there was a lot of structure in place. So if I will not say that my parents were intentional when it comes to imbibing certain virtues in me, especially facing life head on and all that, there was structure. So they had a goal. You could see that, or looking back, I observed that they wanted to mold their children in a certain way, and they did all they could. They prioritized that and put in the necessary structure to be able to bring out the best in us. So, for example, at a very early age, I was exposed to watching international television, international entertainment, those awards, and all that. I was exposed to it. And what that did to me was to expand my imagination. And it was expensive to maintain that lifestyle, for example, the television consumption. But my dad never made any excuse not to subscribe to the cable or whatever is like we're supposed to watch. He
Monthly
prioritized that.
payments.
Exactly. He
Yeah,
prioritized that. He bought us a desktop for us to practice how to use computers. And even though probably they were using it for work sometimes because he had his office in the house, he allowed us to play with it, to toy with it, and it opened our minds to so many things. So something like Facebook, I was on Facebook very early on, and those days we used to chat with foreigners and all that. Foreigners, I mean Caucasians and all that, and that expanded my worldview. So it eventually trickled down into things that I aspire to be and all that. Yeah, so basically that's it from my end.
I see. I mean, talking
Yeah, I
about
think
that,
it was interesting. Yeah.
That must be
Yeah.
yeah.
a recent.
So, yeah, I'm sure not a lot of households were able to. I
Yeah.
mean, we watched GTV and Metro TV for a very long time before TV3 graced us with some difference. It was a hard life at some point. But yes, we've had some. There are some times where the old parenting style really had its impact, affecting our lives the way it has turned out. Like I was saying, even though in my house, for example, time there seems to have been a disconnect because I'll talk from my perspective. I'm sure my sisters and my mother were able to gel along, but I wasn't able to talk to my father. I wasn't able to talk to my mother. That's about anything. Anytime I confided in my sister, she ended up telling my mother, who ended up telling my father, and then I get an indirect talk or speech on the matter, which was never really clear. Like take for example when we were to have the sex education time when I was in junior high. My mother's way of sex education was us watching a Nigerian movie and a
Seriously, we
gentleman
had
gets a
sex
young lady
education.
pregnant. They gave me that example. You see why you shouldn't have sex at this age because when you have sex, you get the young lady pregnant. And so then the movie, the lady's life turned upside down. The man's life kind of turned upside down, until there was light at the end of the tunnel for
But
the
does he bring a scare in you that,
yeah.
oh,
So
okay, yeah, if I do this, it's gonna result that yeah, like, and you were frightened, you don't want to
I
do
mean
this and
I
get
didn't
it
have
done,
sex
it didn't
until
work.
I was 20 plus. You asked. That's what I'm saying. I didn't have 20 plus years.
And
I just was not
what?
interested in yeah.
Okay, but
Nigerian
so
man
now,
will say conjigo card.
A few weeks later, my father called me to his room and gave me a chair to sit down, which was very unusual. And he asked me to watch the television. So they were having a debate on sex education. And the debate was why it should be taught in schools or something like that. And then they were given the practical examples of the reasons why the young people need it and whatnot. And people were opposing against it because after we watched that one, he asked me if I got it. I told him yes, I did. And that was it for him too. Sex education. I got there as well. So I was,
old
it
fashioned,
was,
right?
it was crazy. And yeah, it's very old fashioned. And fortunately for us, this was not to say that, of course, I know that they loved me, they provided for us. They provided us with computer at a time where nobody had computers or people didn't, not many people had it. My father was a computer engineer. I remember we had, when AT&T came to Ghana, he was working with the team. So he had a phone, mobile phone. This was like 1996 or so, 97. It was like one of the first people to have it. I remember when we go for parties, my mother's phone, people would come, my cousins and my friends, they just want to see what it looked like. We could make a call to the US and talk to our cousins there, which was very rare thing at the time because mobile phones were not I mean, communication centers, I don't know if you remember those, they were now springing up at the time.
Yeah.
There were not a lot of them there. So we had exposure to these kind of things. We could talk to cousins outside. It was not until we see them that we kind of met. We could talk, we could chat, this kind of stuff. And then when we see them, it's not now looking new to us that we know each other already. So they provided us as best could, and we knew as children that they loved us. But the way I thought we could, or I see that this modern day parenting style is making the child their friend, where the child has absolute confidence in disclosing whatever. We didn't have that. And I mean, we turned out fine, but I'm just wondering if it could have been better with that kind of connection. I don't know if you get what I'm saying, but could we have been better, much better, if we had a deeper
Definitely.
connection with our parents?
Definitely.
Yes.
Definitely. I think
That's what I think too. But we turned out well.
depending on what you mean by that.
Yeah, what you mean
I'm not
well.
sure I
Yeah.
turned out well. I could have been better.
Yeah, and then parents, I'm really curious about Mayan's own. Really want to know what's on her mind.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Regarding the parenting style or regarding
I think I
the
should want
friendliness
noise
with
from
your
your
parents.
end. I think
How?
Okay, so for me, I've been following all that you people have been saying. For my style of parenting that I had from my parents, it's still this typical African setup kind of parenting where the man is the head and then the woman, always submits and then has to take care of the children. They go to school and all of that. But mine was so old fashioned that um they just ensured you had the basic needs, like you were sheltered, you had food, you go to school, they give you your feeding fee, and that was it. Then maybe sometimes helping you with your homework. That would be my dad doing that. My dad was actually a teacher. So even though sometimes he was soft on us, he didn't hesitate to be strict where the need be. He could easily flog you at the at the
I
least
feel
offense.
you. I feel you. Tina, don't you quite remember Mr. Queen? He can be
Yeah,
scared
never
and he
scared
can
the
be
rod.
a whole lot.
Oh, he
He
was in your
never
school, huh?
scared
yeah,
the rod. Yeah, he was a teacher.
yeah. So
I see.
that was the same kind of thing. The way he gave his students was the same thing he brought home. I could remember there was a day I went out with my big sister. We were going to the corn mill. I carried the maize. So upon return, I felt I was tired. And then I would have my other sister help me. So I left the bucket. And then my other sister was also like, she wouldn't carry anything. So we said, okay, then we'll both leave bucket and go home. When we got home, I was thinking my dad would be like, oh, okay, at least you carried the bucket to the corn mill, and then now that you were done, it was, I mean, okay to say I'm tired, so you needed a helping hand. No, I never got that. They flogged the two of us, and when when my dad flogged you, I don't know if he had flogged any of you before, but when my dad flogged you,
Ah,
you
Life
can
would not
last
be
it
for
the
goes
like
same.
a
deep.
whole week.
It goes deep. It goes deep. I think I share a similar story with you. My
I
immediate younger brother, but we were not last. We were
My,
sent back. Both of us were sent back to go and
uh,
carry the thing. So we held it side by side and brought it home.
I
So
tell
eventually,
you,
when
that
it was
was the same
time,
thing. That was the same thing that happened in my case. So that's the kind of setup I grew up in. I didn't even have the privilege to have all this sex education, not even for once. And also to say I was even being mentored into transitioning from a little girl into adolescence and all of that. So everything was just happening as it should be. There wasn't any much coaching and all of that. So at the point where you were asking if it would have been better for our kids to be made more friends with our parents at the time, I perfectly agree. Things would have been much, much better. But in my case, I was just living all alone. Yes, it was just about school. You go to school, and then unfortunately, I didn't also mingle too well with a lot of people. So it was just about all me. Yeah, being all to
don't you think?
myself.
Don't you think probably they don't know better? They don't know that probably if
Mm,
try it this way, it would have been better.
I think so too. I think so too. Because
I
from
doubt that they
the
know.
yeah, I don't think they know because it
Yeah,
was like
because
very typical
they
of African
they only
parents at the time.
applied what they were used to.
They were exactly, Sana, exactly. So it
no,
was
I
like what
wouldn't
was
say that.
Yeah.
they would only apply what they were used to unless they felt it was the best or unless they felt it helped them. Do you understand me? Because my grandmother used to cane him a lot. He felt he was stubborn and stuff. He was never close to the mom, but
Okay.
my dad brought that closeness among us. Like
Okay.
I would say we were closer to my dad than my mom. And it's
Okay. Do you
weird
think
because mostly people would
yeah,
say
be closer
usually,
to mom than
yeah, even when I'm sick, if my dad is not there, I'm not going to take the medicine. He has a way
that's
of
that's
getting through to me. Yeah, I mean, I was
okay.
really close to him, which he was never close to any of his parents. But he made an improvement of it. So
Yeah.
me,
So
he didn't like
yeah,
it, so he worked on it. That's what I'm saying.
yeah.
That yeah,
Not it's not always the case. So it's also when the people realize that no, the training I had wasn't the perfect one or it wasn't a good one. So when it's my turn, I'm going to improve upon that. I wouldn't let the same things that happened to me happen to my kids. I'm sure that is the realization your dad had. So then he tried to
yeah,
change things. Yeah.
No, so
Yes, just like in
yeah,
other
Maunia,
cases
I
that
think for Faustine,
yeah.
what I would that maybe not from his mother or father directly, but there could have been an uncle or an aunt or an elder cousin that
please don't
provided
talk about
that
that.
kind of mindset. So take for example,
There was none.
for example, where the school I went to, right, Jack and Joe, we had that kind of teachers that were not allowed to cane, where they expressed views in different ways. They found different ways to even punish, among other things, because in those same classrooms were ambassadors, children, and ministers' kids, and whatnot. So I mean, there was a very diplomatic way of handling situations, even no matter how bad it was. You get me? So that kind of also brought a different exposure from where I was coming from. It opened my
Okay.
mind to another world. I mean, I remember at the time, one of the diplomat kids from Ethiopia told me, like he
Okay.
was chatting and then says, when they are having dinner with their father around, nobody's happy because when you drop your cutlery or they hear one noise, your fork knocks the plate, you'll be asked to go and eat in the kitchen, and everybody had to be uptight and whatnot. And I'm like, wow, that is not in a place that we'll just throw the fork somewhere and use our hands to eat, really. Here you are afraid to even, in my mind, I'm like, if my whole family came to eat at your place, we'll all be eating in the kitchen then, because I'm sure everybody's cutlery will at least hit the plate once. So I'm just thinking that for seeing your dad probably had a different exposure to that kind of connection is why you have that as well, because those things are usually not really innate. It's not an innate habit. It has to be something that you have seen somewhere, have loved or have liked, opposed to what you know, and say, you know what, I've seen this, I've seen that, I think I want this, rather than just thinking that, oh, because I didn't have this. I mean, you can't tell from water if you've never had Fanta before, so you know that I've drank water, I've drank Fanta, but I think I like Fanta. Do you understand what I'm saying by that?
I do. You know what? I didn't want to give details though. My dad was born out of wedlock. I think the mom wasn't even ready to keep him, so he was sending someone to drag that get to like abort him, and then the person he was sending would go and buy vitamin and bring it to her. So she kept on taking it, and the baby was growing stronger. So when she decided to go to hospital to actually abort it because the drug wasn't working, the baby was too strong for her to abort. So it was either if you abort it, you're gonna die too, if that is what you want. So that was how come the mom didn't abort him. Now, his other siblings, their mothers were married. His other siblings had siblings that were from one mother, one father. So relation with your siblings was there. He felt alone. And because it was like the mom didn't want him, there was pressure on her to make sure that although my child was out of wedlock, people were talking, people were calling him names, that he wanted him to be best. So she was more strict, and he didn't feel that love from the mom. It's something he kept on saying. But he go to school. Yes, I agree with you to some extent. You go to school, you see other kids, you see them with their parents without even saying much about that. You have siblings that have other siblings from both parents, right? And you see how they relate. But it's like no one have your back. You don't have a sibling that you say one mother, one father, so this person will not betray me, this person wouldn't do this and stuff. He didn't have that. So he wish he's gonna have that. So that's why he never womanized. He doesn't want anything penetrating his kids. Anyone coming that you have a child from outside his marriage, he didn't want any of those things. That's why I was saying that he's seen something he didn't like, and he makes sure that he doesn't want the same for his kid. That was what
Didn't
I was
repeat
talking
itself.
about.
Oh.
Sorry?
No, I mean, he didn't want it repeating itself. The things he didn't like.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh, but that's so
Yeah.
emotional, right? The story about your dad.
Yeah, he
Because
always preach about it. He
if your
always
mom
preach
doesn't give
about
you
it.
the love that you need, then who else? Because the first person, like what we've been made to understand is that the first person you can experience love from is from your mother. I just feel for him.
Yeah.
That's the way.
You know, the worst aspect of it, why the mom too was doing that, was that the mom's elder cousin, right, was dating that man. So she was kind of twin. I send you to the man, and the man will send you back to me, kind of thing. For what happened or not, the man ended up convincing her and sleeping with her. So it's already in town that you took your sister's husband, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So that can all those
Hmm.
segregation, all those insult, all those words made her to do that. I'm not making excuse for her, but sometimes when
Yeah.
you are in those distress
Hmm.
moments, you end up channeling it on the kid, because it was the kid that brought the secret out. It was the
Hmm.
pregnancy that made everyone know what actually happened. If it never happened, so sometimes you end up doing those without knowing.
Hmm.
Yeah, so
I
I
get that.
don't really blame her, and I felt like my dad didn't too. Even him growing up, he was called names because of those actions. You see, it never stopped; it was continuing. So
Hmm.
with his other siblings, when they felt like it was something great, he's about to do something great, they start sending false rumor in town about him. And one thing I love about the man was that he's not bothered. He doesn't give a damn about what anybody is saying about it. And I wish I think I have a little bit of that, but I don't have the totality of it. And I wish I had it all. Don't be bothered about what people are saying. He doesn't care. He's all about, where am I going? What do I want to achieve? What do I want to do?
Okay.
That is not to
But
say
don't
he
you also
never
think those
had
thoughts
any.
actually
I would say,
maybe might have pushed him harder to do?
yes, and I felt like we were my dad's biggest achievement. Aside every other thing he has ever achieved, we were his biggest achievement.
Okay.
And countless times he'd made us felt that way. So we were also on our told that whatever decision we make out there, we're going to make this man proud. Because I had an uncle that wasn't ready to send his kid to school. Or when you start the school, when you get to JSS, he abandoned you. Find your way. You are a man now, or you are a woman now. Find your way and finish your school. But my dad, whether he has it or not, he's going to find it and provide. The only aspect I never liked about it was that my dad it was a question I wanted to throw to all of you. If you have ever observed in like your parents' house, although he was liberal, when he get to a point, let's say he was liberal about us, and he realized I wasn't too much keen on learning, like keeping up, it bothered him. There are things he gets overwhelmed about. Some of those situations, I felt he never handled it well, although he handled it better than my mom. My mom was well, sorry, but he could have handled that better. And I was wondering, did you have, like, you guys, did you have siblings that someone delayed in reading, delayed in something academically, and they felt like they were alone and their parents were more distressed about it? How did it make anyone feel? Or your sibling, you
I
might
mean,
be relating with your siblings, like those observations.
So that's where my
Okay.
challenge
So
comes
yeah,
in.
what you are talking about, like proceeding concerning the fact that you thought some of the things your dad didn't handle well. I sometimes it's just difficult for parents, I believe, to just accept that there's a formula that they went through that they thought didn't work. So if they are trying this formula that they believe should work, they don't see why it shouldn't work, because it's more or less like he has given you everything that he believes you will need to excel. So when you are not excelling in that regard, it becomes frustrating and worrying for him, which is why I believe he
So that's
and
where my
wants
challenge comes
requested or you
in.
want that I haven't provided for you. And I think that's another thing. Yes, that's another thing that, like you rightly said, the old school that separates was another difference between the old school and then the new school. Because they get very easily frustrated. I bought you books. You are going for classes. You're going to the best schools. I'm paying so much for this. I bought you a computer and so on and so forth. So why you're not excelling? Whereas I believe in this era, when they try one thing, okay, it didn't work. Let's try and see if we can do home tuition. Let's try and see if we
definitely.
can put him into this and that and whatnot. Yes, and even to the point of their what special schools and whatnot. I mean, in the time there was this movie that we watched some years ago, like Stars on Earth, where the child was he couldn't read clearly because yes, I mean that would not have sufficed in the old school, because the parents think all your siblings are reading and writing, so how is it that they don't understand that this could be a disease or anything like that, or you had something special in you. But now there's a whole school for that is discovering young kids' talents and the diagnostics and whatnot for all these learning disabilities, among others. So, yes, I mean, these are some of the challenges they face in their time. But here, there have been ways or there are ways now that people are using to discover all these learning defects and what you call it, how to improve on people's learning, memory, and so much. That's what I'll have to say
Yeah.
about that.
But are we
Okay,
using it though?
so that's where my challenge comes in. Answering Faustin's question, um, I think that that type of parenting put a lot of pressure on us to succeed. Okay, so let me talk for myself. So it put a lot of pressure on you to succeed so that at the end of the day, you're not familiar with failure. Can you imagine that I face my very first big, intense failure when I was in university? When I finished university and I was in my 20s, my early 20s, that was when I knew that life is not a straight line.
Yeah.
I realized that with how we were parented, it does not only put a lot of pressure on us because they fancy it, but because most of them have very high expectations of us, leaving very limited or no allowance for us to fail and be human, because failure is part of humanity, whether we like it or not. And when we juxtapose it with your dad's background, for example, you could see that his mom was not given the chance to fail, for example. That was how come probably she wanted to go the route of terminating the child. And even when she couldn't do it, she was not able to live with the consequences. So that's how come I feel that how we should parent or how we are parenting should be leaning more towards empowerment, enlightenment, education than fear. So if I am
Yeah.
empowered,
And I agree.
if I am exposed, if I am educated, I make choices, then I know that this is going to be the consequence. So I think I've even been saying with a few of my friends, I tell them that what I think about, let's say, sex, which Senna introduced earlier, how we were parented when it comes to sex. Nobody said anything about sex. Even till now, when I watch TV and there's this mushy or whatever scene in there with my parents, it's the atmosphere is a bit awkward because like
I
we don't
agree
talk
with
about
you.
it.
I agree with you. I just want to chip in something.
Do
I remember before I got married, let's say I'm having a conversation with you, not even my parents or an older folks, right? But just to mention sex, as if I'm stammering, or should I find another way to,
exactly.
like, it was so hard for me to use those words.
Exactly.
I'm done with that.
But the hard truth remains it is part of life. It is what more or less brought forth virtually all of us, apart from a few of us that were brought forth via artificial insemination and the rest. But virtually a good number of us are a product of this thing called sex. But nobody talked about it. And I keep saying that it's part of, like, not just parts, like it's a very integral part of our adult life. I remember very well that just recently, probably a week ago, I was talking to my mom and I mentioned that, Mom, why is it you never talk to me about boys? You never talk to me about sex. You never talk to me about things of that nature. And she casually said, oh, you are well read. She knows that I'll definitely read about those things, and there's a good chance I even know those things better than her. And I said, initially I was dumbfounded.
Good chance you know and here.
Come on.
still,
But
it
you
doesn't.
know, I'm happy that finally she was able to say something, because I've been asking this question and she doesn't really give me any tangible answer. So I know what to do probably with my kids. But you see, after sleeping over it, usually I brood a lot. I don't usually have immediate answers. Sometimes I need to think, I need to analyze it from virtually all angles, then I come up with my next thought. So although that sounded convincing, it was not convincing for me, because I'm like, it would have been nice, it would have carried more power if that talk was coming from you. Do you know why? It makes it very, I am able to relate more. That's number one. Number two, it stays at the fore of my mind because it is a story of my mother, not a story that I'm reading in a book, or I'm reading on the internet, or I'm hearing on the podcast, or I'm listening to other people talk about it. And it comes in more handy, it carries more power. So I was telling her that God placed her in my life as a mother with certain privileges. And I think some of these privileges, most of them didn't maximize it because probably they didn't know better, or probably those who know better didn't think it necessary, or they just didn't know how to go about it. So about how we are parenting, empowerment, educate, exposure. Now my last point about that is that all of them have consequences. So yesterday I was listening to somebody talk about, I can't talk to my 10-year-old child about sex. I can't talk to my 3-year-old child that don't let this person put their hand in your pee-pee, this and this and this and that.
This and that one.
I didn't know the second that I didn't know the minute I turned that thing off, because you don't educate your child because you are expecting that thing to happen to your child. No, you are educating your child, exposing your child so that when they are confronted with that, they come from a position of power. They know what to do. They know their left from right. They don't get lost. So let's even move away from sex. Nobody talked to me about finance.
Yeah,
I was not
this is a very
exposed to.
powerful. Well, I mean, what you said. This is a very powerful statement you have made, in that it's important for us to know that uh, the power must be in the hand of who has been confronted, or he who has been confronted with a challenge, so that he or she can make a much more informed decision as to which path they should take. And when they take that path, they must know the consequences whatsoever, or the rewards that will come with that particular path that they are taking, rather than force what you call it, a decision or an idea of some sort on the person, that when this one comes, this way you should take. The fact of the matter is that the particular things that you say the child shouldn't do is what is more pleasing, you know, to the child for him or her to do. And I think parents fail to see it as such. They think that they'll do the child a disservice if they pry more into that these topics of that. So that's a very powerful thing that you have said. Thanks for sharing on that.
I wanted to say something based on what you said. It's true, like kids, if you don't get to explain things to them and carry them along, that's how I frame it. I always frame it that way. Carry the child along. Let the child feel like I'm experiencing it without necessarily experiencing it. Mostly, it makes a lot of sense to them, to kids, when you do that, than when you just say, don't do it. We don't do it. Just don't do it. Like, no. So the kid is curious. One basic thing about every child, even a baby growing up, is that they are curious. They want to find why this is here. What is this doing? Why, like, what should I play with it? Should I hit it on the ground? Should I do this with it? So if you tell the person not to do it, the person is going to do it. And that is when we say the child is stubborn. No, the child is not stubborn. So I agree with you. They just want to explore, find out for themselves. That curiosity is in every human being. So they are going to find it out. So if you don't do due diligence to educate them and then let them experience it without necessarily experiencing it, that's what is going to happen. So I agree with you, and I'm just adding that up.
All too soon, we've come to the end of this episode. The conversation continues on our next episode. Kindly do well to take a listen and let's keep the conversation going on our social media platforms. It is Great Minds Africa. Remember, you were born great, so thrive.